champagne, gorgeous dresses and glamorous people. 700 people attended the 7th Lewisham Award ceremony at the Sky City Conference Room. The awards were created to recognise exceptional talent and service in the Auckland hospitality industry. Among them is multi-talented Connie Clarkson. She writes food articles, talks about food on radio and demonstrates her cooking talent on TV. But in tonight's event, she's playing a different role.
My role as chairperson is to oversee the running of the awards as well as the running of the disbursements of funds for about 10 months of the year. And after all that, we have the awards and we celebrate 16 winners of the Auckland hospitality industry.
I think Connie Clarkson was chosen because of her experience in the hospitality business, that she had worked for the international hotel group Hyatt. She'd also run her own restaurant, so she really knew and understood the difficulties and the challenges of running a successful hospitality outlet.
Connie came here to study home science in Dunedin, and her first culture shock was New Zealand food.
The first meal I had in boarding school was corn silverside, which was cooked so much that it was completely grey, and braised cabbage was also cooked so much that it was completely dead, and mashed potatoes. You can imagine the plate, right? Grey, white. It was pretty bad.
So she cooked her own food. Her knowledge and tastes have been influenced by her heritage.
I guess it's my Peranakan roots, which is Straits-born roots, which a lot of people understand it to be Nonya food. And that's a blend of Chinese and Malay cuisine brought by the turn of the century Chinese people coming down from South China into Malaysia. And so the cuisines blended. And particularly with these cuisines, food is very labour-intensive, and my grandmother used to cook for a living. She catered from her house, and I grew up in that, and I grew up with smells in the kitchen. And my mother was the champion of European food in Singapore. So, you know, these women, these are the strong women of my life, and they've influenced my love of food, and that's how it all started.
These women also had an influence on the food editor of Cuisine magazine, Ray McVinney.
Almost 15 years ago, I spent a week in Singapore with Connie and her mother, and that would have to have been the biggest gift for my professional career, or one of them, that anyone's ever given me, to be able to educate me on the food of Singapore, which, of course, once you learn about the very diverse culinary world of Singapore, you learn all sorts of things about Asian foods.
Connie loved food so much that buying a restaurant was a logical move. And the first one she bought was not Asian.
I think that at the time I decided, I think I was about 35 or so, and I've always wanted a restaurant. Don't ask me why, it was just something that was inside me, you know? Love food, love cooking. I used to pretend that I was a restaurant and plate the food nicely and everything. So I thought, young enough to take a risk, and if it didn't work out, I was still young enough to actually build another career. So decided that was the time to look for a restaurant, which I then did and bought the French Cafe.
She sold the highly successful French Cafe after 5 years owing to family commitments, but remains great friends with Kate Fay, the restaurant's original head chef.
I always, say that Connie taught me to do was to taste properly and not just taste one thing. First taste for the salt, then taste for the fish sauce, or then taste for the lemongrass and stuff like that. So that was the best thing that I think she did teach me, is to not try and, people get so confused, young chefs do, they try and taste everything all in one hit rather than just think, like, okay, is there enough salt in there? All right, is there enough lime?
It's actually something my great-grandmother taught me, because, your brain, you can't taste, she used to say, you cannot taste everything all at once, because your brain needs to think very simply. So you put the thing in your mouth and you go, is it sweet enough? And then you put it again, is it salty enough,
After the restaurant operation, she returned to her marketing and communication job. But at the same time, she manages to indulge her passion for cooking by giving classes on radio and TV. She also writes for prestigious magazines like The World and Metro. And she's also published her own cookbook.
Her writing in magazines, I think she's great. She's authoritative, she's informative, she's amusing. You know, you've got to have a sense of humour, otherwise you're boring. No, she knows what she's talking about. And when I read her articles, I always learn something, which, for me, I always want to learn something.
So what can we learn from Connie about fusion food and future trends?
Fusion's a dreadful word. It's a dreadful word. I mean, I guess it was coined in the late 80s, early 90s because nobody else knew what it was, what we were doing. You know, it's like East meets West or a hint of Asian or fusion or whatever. I think that these days, though, fusion, I don't know how you define that. Because of the wealth of ingredients that are available, any chef that's worth their salt will experiment. And if it works, it works. If you want to call it fusion, you can, but I think it's a dreadful word, though. And I, for one, would really love to see a lot more people eat in the likes of the food halls, you know, the cheaper dishes. You can eat so well in food halls. You know, $5 gets you a fantastic bowl of noodles.
Connie's enjoying life, and among all her responsibilities, there's one that's become a favourite.
I guess my favourite job is being granny. I'm a grandmother to two really beautiful girls, and if I had my choice, I'd be granny all the time.
While these days her favourite job might be granny, let's hope she doesn't give up recipes like this. A Western-style dish with a hint of the East. Crab ravioli with lemon butter. For the recipe of this dish, head to this website. Well, that's it for this week. As usual, we can be found on demand on the TVNZ website. And please do keep sending us your information for our diary. We leave you with this rousing opening to the Wellington Japanese Festival of last weekend. Here's the taiko drums of the Auckland group Hairemai. Kamsahamnida and see you soon.
This program is made with funding from New Zealand On Air.